I never thought I would spend a Tuesday morning watching an entitled HOA board member total her Mercedes SUV in my driveway while screaming that it was somehow my fault. But there I was, coffee in hand, witnessing the most absurd spectacle of my 32 years on this planet. My name is Scott Zimmerman, and I had just moved to Pinecrest Heights, a subdivision in Greenwood, Indiana, about 3 months prior. The house was perfect. A 3-bedroom ranch with a detached garage, a decent yard, and what I thought was a quiet neighborhood full of reasonable people. I worked remotely as a software engineer, so the peaceful suburban setting seemed ideal for focusing on my projects without the chaos of city living. What I did not account for was the Pinecrest Heights Homeowners Association and its tyrannical vice president, Brenda Whitmore. Brenda was everything you would imagine when you heard the term HOA Karen. She was 53 years old, drove a white Mercedes GLE, and wore her highlighted blonde hair in that distinctive, "I want to speak to the manager," layered bob. She had a habit of showing up unannounced to inspect properties for violations, armed with a binder full of bylaws and a permanent scowl that suggested she had never experienced joy in her entire life. The snowstorm hit Greenwood hard that February morning. Weather reports had predicted 6 to 8 inches, but by dawn we already had nearly a foot on the ground with no signs of stopping. I had woken up early, around 6, and spent a solid hour clearing my driveway with my snowblower. The machine was one of the first things I purchased after moving to Indiana from Arizona, where snow was something you drove to see rather than something that invaded your daily life. I took pride in keeping my property immaculate. My driveway was clean, my sidewalks were shoveled, and I even cleared a path to my mailbox. The temperature hovered around 22 degrees, and the wind whipped the falling snow into swirling patterns that made visibility challenging. I finished my outdoor work, came inside, stripped off my layers of winter gear, and made myself a strong pot of coffee. That was when I heard the engine revving. At first, I thought someone was trying to get unstuck on the main road. The sound grew louder, more aggressive, accompanied by the high-pitched whine of tires spinning uselessly on ice. I walked to my living room window, pushed aside the curtain, and could not believe what I was seeing. Brenda's white Mercedes was fishtailing wildly down my street, moving far too fast for the conditions. She was not slowing down. If anything, she seemed to be accelerating. I watched in horror as the massive SUV lost all traction, spun completely sideways, and came barreling directly toward my house. "No, no, no," I shouted, though there was nothing I could do. The Mercedes jumped the curb, plowed through the small decorative hedge at the edge of my property, and slammed hood first into the light post at the end of my driveway. The impact was tremendous. The sound of crunching metal and shattering plastic echoed through the quiet morning. The airbags deployed with explosive force, and steam began pouring from the destroyed front end of the vehicle. I dropped my coffee mug on the counter and ran outside without even grabbing a coat. The cold hit me like a physical blow, but adrenaline kept me moving. I ran down my driveway, slipping slightly on some ice I had missed, and reached the wrecked SUV. "Are you okay?" I called out, approaching the driver's side door. Through the deployed airbag and spider-webbed windshield, I could see Brenda pushing frantically at the deflating bag, her face red with what I initially assumed was distress from the accident. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. "Brenda, unlock the door. Are you hurt?" She finally managed to hit the unlock button, and I yanked the door open. She practically fell out of the vehicle, stumbling in her designer boots that were completely inappropriate for the weather. "Are you injured? Should I call an ambulance?" I asked, reaching out to steady her. She swatted my hand away with shocking force. "Get your hands off me." I stepped back, confused. "I'm trying to help. You just crashed into my driveway." Brenda's face was twisted with fury, not fear or pain. She pointed an accusatory finger at me, her voice shrill and cutting through the howling wind. "This is your fault. Your driveway is a hazard. I'm calling the police, and you're going to pay for every cent of damage to my vehicle." I stood there in the falling snow, wearing only jeans and a thermal shirt, staring at this woman in complete disbelief. "My fault. You were driving too fast in a snowstorm. You crashed into my property. Your driveway was icy. I was coming to inspect your property for snow removal violations, and I hit ice right at your curb. This is clearly negligence on your part." She was already pulling out her phone, her hands shaking either from cold or rage, probably both. "I cleared my driveway. It was clean. You were speeding." I could feel my own anger rising, but I tried to keep my voice level. The woman had just been in a serious accident, even if she was acting insane. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me," Brenda shrieked. "I am the vice president of the Pinecrest Heights HOA, and I will make sure you are fined for this. Your negligence caused this accident." Before I could respond, she was already speaking rapidly into her phone, presumably to 911. I looked at her mangled Mercedes. The entire front end was destroyed, the hood crumpled like an accordion, fluids leaking onto my driveway and mixing with the snow. My light post was bent at a 45-degree angle, the fixture hanging by its wires. I went back inside to grab my own phone and a coat. My hands were already numb from the cold. When I returned, Brenda was sitting in her destroyed SUV, the door open, still on the phone. She was now speaking to someone else, her tone sugary sweet in that fake way that made my skin crawl. "Yes, that's right. The homeowner's negligence caused me to crash. I'm going to need a tow truck immediately, and I want to file a claim against the property owner. His name is Scott Zimmerman." I could not let this stand. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures of everything. The skid marks showing her path from the street, the destroyed hedge, the wrecked SUV, the damaged light post, and multiple shots of my clearly maintained and properly cleared driveway. I even took a video, narrating what had happened while the evidence was fresh. The police arrived about 20 minutes later. Officer Davidson was a middle-aged man with a patient expression that suggested he had seen everything. His partner, a younger officer named Martinez, began setting up cones and flares to warn other drivers about the obstruction. "Can someone tell me what happened here?" Officer Davidson asked, pulling out a notepad. Brenda immediately launched into her version of events. "Officer, I was performing my duties as HOA vice president, conducting routine inspections for code violations during the snow event. As I approached this property, I encountered an icy hazard at the edge of this homeowner's driveway. My vehicle lost traction due to his negligence in properly maintaining his property, and I crashed as a result. I'm lucky to be alive." Officer Davidson nodded, writing notes, then turned to me. "And you are Scott Zimmerman. I own this property." I was inside my house after spending an hour clearing my driveway and sidewalks when I heard a vehicle engine revving. I looked outside and saw her coming down the street way too fast for conditions. She lost control well before she reached my property, fishtailed completely sideways and crashed into my light post. Brenda gasped dramatically. "That's a complete lie." Officer Davidson held up a hand. "Madam, please, let me conduct my investigation." He walked around the scene, examining the tire tracks in the snow. The evidence was pretty clear. The marks showed the Mercedes had been sliding and out of control for at least 40 feet before it even reached my property line. "Mr. Zimmerman, did you clear your driveway this morning?" The officer asked. "Yes, sir, around 6 a.m. I used my snowblower on the driveway and my shovel on the sidewalks." I pointed to the clearly maintained surfaces. "And the street? Did you do anything to the street?" "No, sir. I don't maintain the public street. That's the city's responsibility." Officer Davidson nodded, making more notes. He took his own photographs of the scene, then walked back to where Brenda and I were standing. The snow continued to fall heavily, already starting to obscure some of the evidence. "Madam, I need to see your license and registration, please." Brenda huffed but retrieved the documents from her ruined vehicle. Officer Davidson examined them, then returned to his patrol car to run whatever checks officers do. Officer Martinez approached us. "Are either of you injured? Do you need medical attention?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm in shock," Brenda said dramatically. "I'll need to see my doctor." "The paramedics are on their way," Martinez informed her. "They'll check you out." When Officer Davidson returned, he had a completed accident report. Miss Whitmore, based on the physical evidence at the scene, this appears to be a case of driving too fast for conditions. The skid marks indicate you lost control of your vehicle on the public street, well before reaching Mr. Zimmerman's property. I'm issuing you a citation for unsafe driving." Brenda's face went purple. "You cannot be serious. This man's negligence caused this accident, madam. Mr. Zimmerman's driveway is properly maintained. The ice that caused you to lose control is on the public street, which is not his responsibility. Additionally, the weather conditions require extra caution. You were traveling at an unsafe speed." "I was going 20 miles per hour, she protested. "In these conditions, even 20 miles per hour can be too fast," Officer Davidson said calmly. "The speed limit on this residential street is 25, but that's for ideal conditions. You're required to adjust your speed for weather and road conditions." Brenda snatched the citation from his hand. "This is ridiculous. I know the mayor. I know the police chief. This will be taken care of." Officer Davidson remained professional. "You have the right to contest the citation in court, madam. The information is on the ticket." The tow truck arrived shortly after, followed by an ambulance. The paramedics checked Brenda over despite her protests that she was fine and did not need their help, though moments earlier she had claimed to be in shock. They cleared her medically, noting only minor bruising from the airbag deployment. As the tow truck operator hooked up the destroyed Mercedes, Brenda walked up my driveway to where I stood near my garage. Her boots crunched in the snow and her expression was venomous. "This isn't over, Scott," she said, her voice low and threatening. "The HOA board meets tomorrow night. I'm bringing this incident before the board, and you will be held financially responsible for the damage to my vehicle. Our bylaws clearly state that homeowners are liable for any hazards on or adjacent to their properties. Your vehicle never even touched my property until it was completely out of control," I said. "And I have pictures and video evidence, plus a police report that says you were at fault. We'll see what the board has to say about that." She turned and marched back toward the tow truck, which was now lifting her ruined Mercedes onto its flatbed. After everyone left, I spent another hour dealing with the aftermath. My light post was destroyed and would need to be replaced. My decorative hedge was ruined. There were deep ruts in my front lawn where the SUV had torn through. I documented all of it thoroughly, knowing I would probably need the evidence. That evening, I received an email from the Pinecrest Heights HOA. It was from Brenda, sent to me and the entire board. "Dear board members and Mr. Zimmerman, this morning I was performing my duties as vice president when I was involved in a serious accident caused by hazardous conditions at 847 Maple Drive. the property of Scott Zimmerman. Due to Mr. Zimmerman's failure to properly maintain his property and ensure safe conditions, I suffered personal injury and extensive damage to my vehicle estimated at over $15,000. I am formally requesting that the board hold an emergency meeting to address this matter and assess appropriate fines and restitution from Mr. Zimmerman. His negligence reflects poorly on our community and poses a danger to all residents. This incident must be addressed immediately. Sincerely, Brenda Whitmore, Vice President, Pinecrest Heights HOA. I read the email 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each pass. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to use the HOA as her personal attack dog to force me to pay for an accident she had caused. I spent the next 2 hours crafting a response, attaching photos, video, and a copy of the police report. I sent it to the entire board. Dear board members, I am responding to Ms. Whitmore's email regarding this morning's incident. The facts are as follows. At approximately 7:15 a.m., I had just finished clearing my driveway and sidewalks when Ms. Whitmore lost control of her vehicle on the public street. She was traveling too fast for conditions and crashed into my property, destroying my light post and landscaping. The police report, attached, clearly states that Ms. Whitmore was at fault for unsafe driving. She was issued a citation. The investigating officer confirmed that my property was properly maintained and that I bore no responsibility for the accident. I have attached photographic and video evidence showing the scene, the skid marks indicating where Ms. Whitmore lost control, and the condition of my property both before and after the accident. I am prepared to pursue a claim against Ms. Whitmore for the damage to my property, which includes a destroyed light post and ruined landscaping. However, I am writing this email in hopes that we can handle this matter reasonably and professionally. I strongly object to Ms. Whitmore's attempt to misuse her position on the HOA board to intimidate me and avoid responsibility for her own actions. Respectfully, Scott Zimmerman, the board president, Donald Klein, replied within an hour. Mr. Zimmerman and board members, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I have reviewed the police report and the evidence provided by Mr. Zimmerman. Based on this information, it is clear that Ms. Whitmore was at fault for the accident and that Mr. Zimmerman's property was properly maintained. Ms. Whitmore, while I appreciate your dedication to the HOA, I must remind you that the board cannot be used to resolve personal disputes, especially when those disputes involve your own negligence. This is a matter for your insurance company, not the HOA. Mr. Zimmerman, you have my apologies for this situation. Please provide estimates for the damage to your property, and I recommend you work with Ms. Whitmore's insurance to recover those costs. There will be no emergency board meeting regarding this matter. Donald Klein, President, Pinecrest Heights HOA. I felt a wave of relief. At least the board president seemed reasonable, but I should have known Brenda would not give up that easily. The next morning, I found a violation notice posted on my front door. It was written on official HOA letterhead and signed by Brenda. Violation notice property. 847 Maple Drive homeowner, Scott Zimmerman. Date, February 18, 2026. Violations. 1. Damaged landscaping visible from street, Section 4.2.1. 2. Damaged/inoperable light fixture, Section 4.3.73. Ruts and damage to lawn, Section 4.2.3. You have 7 days to correct these violations or face fines of $100 per day per violation. Brenda Whitmore, Vice President, Pinecrest Heights, HOA. I actually laughed out loud when I read it. The sheer audacity of the woman was almost impressive. She had destroyed my property, and now she was citing me for having damaged property that she had damaged. I immediately scanned the notice and emailed it to Donald Klein with a simple message. "Really?" Donald called me within 10 minutes. "Scott, I am so sorry. Brenda is way out of line. Please disregard that notice. I'm calling an emergency board meeting tonight to discuss her conduct." "Thank you, Donald. I appreciate that." "Between you and me," Donald said, lowering his voice, "Brenda has been a problem for a while now. She's overzealous, to put it mildly. This incident might be the final straw." That evening, I received another email from Donald. The board had voted to temporarily suspend Brenda's authority to issue violations or conduct inspections, pending a full review of her conduct. 2 other board members had sent me personal apologies for the situation. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I received a letter from Brenda's attorney, Richard Feldman of Feldman and Associates in Indianapolis. The letter informed me that Brenda was pursuing a civil claim against me for $25,000, covering vehicle damage, medical expenses, pain and suffering, and lost wages due to injuries sustained in the accident. I had never been sued before. The letter made my stomach drop, even though I knew I had done nothing wrong. I immediately contacted my homeowner's insurance company, State Farm, and explained the situation. My agent, a helpful woman named Patricia, assured me that my liability coverage would handle the claim and provide legal representation if necessary. "The police report clearly establishes that you weren't at fault," Patricia said. "This sounds like a nuisance suit." "Don't worry, we deal with these all the time. We'll handle it." State Farm assigned the case to their legal team, and a week later, Brenda received a response denying her claim and citing the police report, photographs, and video evidence. The letter also noted that I had a valid counterclaim for the damage to my property, which totaled approximately $3,800 after I got estimates for replacing the light post and landscaping. Most people would have backed down at that point. Brenda doubled down. She hired a second lawyer, filed complaints with the city claiming my property was a hazard, and even reported me to the Better Business Bureau, despite the fact that I was not a business. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed, but each one cost me time and stress. The worst part was living in the neighborhood. Brenda began a whisper campaign, telling neighbors that I was responsible for her accident and that I was refusing to take accountability. Some people believed her, or at least chose to avoid the conflict by avoiding me. I went from being friendly with my neighbors to being treated like a pariah by about half the street. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman next door, was one of the few who actively supported me. She had seen the whole thing happen from her window. "That woman is crazy, Mrs. Henderson told me one afternoon when she brought over cookies. "I saw her flying down the street like a bat out of hell. You didn't do anything wrong, dear. Don't let her bully you." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I really appreciate that." "I told Donald Klein exactly what I saw, too," she said firmly. "At the next HOA meeting, I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for mid-March, about a month after the incident. Donald had placed an agenda item to discuss Brenda's continued role on the board given her recent conduct. I decided to attend. I had never been to an HOA meeting before and was not looking forward to it, but I needed to defend myself against Brenda's ongoing campaign of harassment. The meeting was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood pool. About 30 residents attended, which Donald later told me was triple the normal turnout. Word had spread about the drama, and people were curious. Brenda sat at the front table with the other board members. Donald, the the treasurer Mark Paulson, and the secretary Julie Richardson. She looked smug, her arms crossed, clearly confident that she had the support she needed. Donald called the meeting to order and went through the standard agenda items: budget updates, upcoming neighborhood events, and routine business. Finally, he reached the item everyone was waiting for. Item 7. Discussion regarding board member conduct and potential disciplinary action, Donald announced. As most of you are aware, there was an incident last month involving Board Vice President Brenda Whitmore and resident Scott Zimmerman. Brenda has made various claims about Scott's responsibility for an accident that occurred on his property. We have investigated these claims thoroughly. Brenda immediately interrupted. I don't appreciate being blindsided like this, Donald. This is highly inappropriate. You were informed that this would be on the agenda, Donald said calmly. You've had a week to prepare any statement you wish to make. My statement is that Scott Zimmerman is a liability to this community and should be fined according to our bylaws, Brenda said loudly. Mrs. Henderson raised her hand. Donald recognized her. I witnessed the entire accident from my front window, Mrs. Henderson said, standing up shakily. Brenda was driving far too fast. She lost control on the street, not on Scott's property. Scott had nothing to do with it. I gave a statement to the police at the time, and I'm happy to repeat it now. Brenda is lying to avoid responsibility for her own reckless driving. Several neighbors murmured in agreement. Brenda's face turned red. That's ridiculous. You're an 80-year-old woman with failing eyesight. Your testimony is worthless, Brenda shouted. The room went silent. Donald stared at Brenda in shock. My eyesight is fine, thank you very much, Mrs. Henderson said coldly. And I know what I saw. Another neighbor, Tom Hargrove, stood up. I'm 3 houses down from Scott. I saw Brenda's car speeding that morning too. We all know she drives too fast through the neighborhood. My kids play on these streets. I've complained about it before. More neighbors began speaking up, sharing their own experiences with Brenda's aggressive driving and her overzealous enforcement of HOA rules. The meeting devolved into a litany of complaints about Brenda's conduct over the past 2 years. Donald banged his gavel, trying to restore order. Okay. Let's maintain decorum, please. Brenda, do you have anything to say in your defense? Brenda stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're all ganging up on me because I actually enforce the rules. This neighborhood would fall apart without me. Scott Zimmerman is a liar and you're all fools for believing him. Brenda, sit down, Donald said firmly. No, I will not be silenced. I've given 2 years of my life to this board and this is the thanks I get. Fine, I quit. She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, but then turned back. And Scott, you haven't heard the last of this. I will get my money from you one way or another. The room erupted in shocked whispers as Brenda slammed the door behind her. Donald sighed heavily. Well, that saves us from a difficult vote. I'll note for the record that Brenda Whitmore has resigned from the board effective immediately. We'll need to hold a special election for the vice president position. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me to apologize for believing Brenda's lies or for not supporting me earlier. It felt good to have the truth out in the open, but I knew Brenda was not done with me. I was right. 2 weeks later, I received a summons. Brenda was actually taking me to court, filing in Marion County Small Claims Court for $25,000. Despite my insurance company's attempts to negotiate, despite the police report, despite everything, she was pursuing litigation. My insurance company hired a lawyer named Thomas Grayson to represent me. Thomas was in his 40s, experienced in insurance defense, and completely unfazed by Brenda's tactics. I've seen cases like this before. Thomas told me during our first meeting at his office in downtown Indianapolis. "She's hoping you'll settle just to make it go away." Insurance companies do that sometimes. It's cheaper than fighting. But State Farm has agreed to contest this because the claim is so clearly frivolous, and they don't want to set a precedent. "What are my chances?" I asked. "Honestly, excellent. The police report alone should be enough to get this dismissed. Add in your photos, video, and witness testimony, and she doesn't have a case, but we still have to go through the process." The court date was set for late April. In the meantime, life went on. I replaced my light post, repaired my landscaping, and tried to ignore the occasional glares from Brenda when we happened to pass each other in the neighborhood. She had moved her car to the opposite side of the street from my house and would gun the engine whenever she drove past, apparently to make some kind of point. The HOA held its special election, and a reasonable woman named Carol Drake was elected as the new vice president. Carol's first act was to rescind all of Brenda's pending violations and issue a formal apology to several residents, including me, for overzealous enforcement. As the court date approached, something interesting happened. Thomas called me with news. "Scott, I just got a call from Brenda's attorney. He's withdrawing from the case." "Why?" He wouldn't say explicitly, but reading between the lines, I think he realized his client lied to him about the facts. Lawyers can't knowingly present false testimony. He's protecting his own license. So what does that mean for the case? It means Brenda can either find a new lawyer or represent herself. Given that her case is baseless, I doubt she'll find anyone reputable to take it. 2 weeks before the court date, Brenda filed a notice that she would be representing herself. Thomas was thrilled. "This is the best possible scenario for us," he said. "She doesn't understand courtroom procedure, the rules of evidence, or how to present a case. This will be over quickly." The morning of the hearing, I put on my best suit and met Thomas at the Marion County Small Claims Court. The building was busy, full of people handling various disputes. Thomas and I waited in the hallway until our case was called. Brenda arrived wearing a business suit and carrying a large binder, presumably full of her evidence. She glared at me but did not speak. We were eventually called into the courtroom. The judge was a woman named Judge Patricia Morrison, who had a reputation for being no-nonsense and efficient. She reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up at us. "Miss Whitmore, you're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor. I couldn't afford another attorney after my first lawyer abandoned me." Judge Morrison nodded. "Very well, Mr. Grayson, you're representing the defendant." "Yes, Your Honor." "Let's proceed. Miss Whitmore, this is your claim. Please present your case." Brenda stood and launched into a dramatic retelling of the accident, complete with exaggerated descriptions of her injuries and emotional trauma. She claimed I had intentionally failed to maintain my property as an act of hostility toward the HOA because I resented oversight. Judge Morrison listened patiently, occasionally making notes. When Brenda finished, the judge asked, "Do you have any evidence to support your claims?" Brenda opened her binder and pulled out several photographs. These photos show the damaged condition of Mr. Zimmerman's property after the accident, proving it was hazardous. "Those photos show damage caused by your vehicle," Judge Morrison observed dryly. "Exactly. Damage I sustained because of his negligence. Miss Whitmore, do you have any evidence that Mr. Zimmerman's property was improperly maintained before the accident?" Brenda hesitated. I know it was icy. I hit ice on the public street, according to the police report," Judge Morrison said, flipping through the file. "Mr. Grayson, your response." Thomas stood and methodically presented our evidence. The police report showing Brenda was cited for unsafe driving. my photographs showing the properly maintained driveway, my video narration recorded immediately after the accident, and a written statement from Mrs. Henderson describing what she witnessed. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Miss Whitmore lost control of her vehicle due to her own excessive speed in hazardous weather conditions. She lost control on the public street, not on my client's property. Mr. Zimmerman had properly maintained his property in accordance with all applicable laws and HOA regulations. Miss Whitmore's claim is entirely without merit. Judge Morrison reviewed all the evidence carefully. She looked at the photographs, read the police report, and even watched my video on Thomas's laptop. Finally, she spoke. Miss Whitmore, your claim is dismissed. The evidence is overwhelming that you caused this accident through your own negligence. Mr. Zimmerman bears no responsibility whatsoever for the damage to your vehicle. Brenda's mouth fell open. But Your Honor, my ruling is final. Furthermore, I'm granting Mr. Zimmerman's counterclaim for property damage in the amount of $3,800. You will reimburse him for the cost of repairing the damage your vehicle caused to his light post and landscaping. You have 30 days to pay. This is outrageous, Brenda shouted. He's a liar. He caused this accident. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Miss Whitmore, I've reviewed the evidence carefully. The police report, the photographs, and the witness statements all contradict your version of events. You were found at fault by the investigating officer. You were issued a citation. You have provided no credible evidence to support your claim. If you continue to disrupt these proceedings, I will hold you in contempt. Brenda grabbed her binder and stormed out of the courtroom, muttering angrily. Judge Morrison turned to Thomas and me. Mr. Zimmerman, I apologize that you had to go through this. Unfortunately, people sometimes abuse the court system to avoid responsibility for their own actions. You're free to go. Thank you, Your Honor, I said, relief flooding through me. Outside the courthouse, Thomas shook my hand. Congratulations. That went exactly as we hoped. State Farm will handle collecting the judgment from Miss Whitmore. You should receive your $3,800 within a few weeks. Thank you, Thomas. I really appreciate everything you did. Just doing my job, but I'll tell you that was one of the clearest-cut cases I've ever handled. Some people just can't admit when they're wrong. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The nightmare was finally over, except it was not. 2 days after the court hearing, I woke up to find that someone had spray-painted "liar" across my garage door in bright red paint. The same word was painted on my driveway. I immediately called the police. Officer Martinez, who had been at the scene of the original accident, took my report. Do you have any suspects? Brenda Whitmore, I said without hesitation. We just had a court hearing where she lost badly and had to pay me $3,800. This seems like retaliation. You have any proof it was her? No, but who else would do this? I understand your suspicion, Mr. Zimmerman, but without evidence, there's not much we can do. I'll file the report as vandalism. Do you have security cameras? No, but I'm installing them today. I spent that afternoon setting up a comprehensive security camera system covering every angle of my property: front door, back door, driveway, garage, and yard. The system uploaded footage to the cloud in real time, so even if someone destroyed the cameras, the video would be preserved. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, my security system's motion alert woke me up. I grabbed my phone and opened the app. The camera showed a figure dressed in dark clothes approaching my mailbox with what looked like a baseball bat. I watched in disbelief as the figure smashed my mailbox off its post, then proceeded to bash in the headlights of my car parked in the driveway. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds before the figure ran back to a car parked down the street. I had already called 911. Someone is vandalizing my property right now. I have them on camera. The dispatcher kept me on the line while officers were dispatched. I watched through my window as the car sped away, but I had captured clear footage including the license plate. 2 police officers arrived within 5 minutes, followed shortly by Officer Martinez, who apparently requested to respond when he heard my address. "We meet again," Martinez said with a tired smile. "Show me the footage." I pulled up the video on my phone. The footage was crystal clear, captured by my high-definition cameras with night vision. You could see the vandal's face clearly during several moments when they looked up. It was Brenda. "That's Brenda Whitmore," I said. "And that's her car." Martinez watched the video several times, making notes. "This is excellent evidence. We have clear video of her face, her vehicle, and her license plate. I'm going to call my supervisor. This is beyond simple vandalism now. This is targeted harassment and potentially stalking given the ongoing nature of her conduct." A sergeant arrived, reviewed the footage, and made the decision. "We're going to her house now to arrest her." At 3 in the morning, several police vehicles rolled out to Brenda's house, 4 blocks away. I stayed at my property, giving a detailed statement to another officer and documenting the damage to my mailbox and car. About an hour later, Officer Martinez returned. "We arrested her. She's being charged with criminal mischief and criminal trespass. When we got to her house, we found the clothes she was wearing in your video, the baseball bat, and spray paint cans in her car that match the paint on your garage." She initially denied everything, then started ranting about how you deserved it for ruining her life. "What happens now?" I asked. "She'll be arraigned in the morning. Given that this is her first arrest, she'll probably be released on bond, but there will be conditions, likely including a no-contact order prohibiting her from coming near you or your property. The prosecutor will handle the criminal case. You can also pursue a civil protective order if you want additional protection." I went back to bed but could not sleep. The sun was rising by the time I gave up and made coffee. My mailbox was destroyed, lying in pieces in my yard. Both headlights on my car were smashed. The word "liar" was still spray painted across my garage and driveway. I called my insurance company again. Patricia sighed when she heard my voice. "Scott, what happened now?" I explained the situation. She was appropriately outraged and promised to expedite my claim. My auto insurance would cover the headlights, and my homeowner's insurance would cover the mailbox and the cost of removing the spray paint and repainting the garage door. We're also going to pursue reimbursement from Miss Whitmore for all these costs, plus your previous property damage claim," Patricia said. "This woman is going to owe you quite a bit of money." The neighborhood grapevine went into overdrive. By noon, everyone knew that Brenda had been arrested. The HOA board president, Donald, called to apologize yet again and to assure me that the board would fully support me if I needed anything. Mrs. Henderson brought over lunch. "I heard the police cars last night. Are you okay, dear?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. Thank you." "That woman belongs in jail," she said firmly. "I've been in this neighborhood for 30 years, and I've never seen anyone act so crazy." Brenda was arraigned later that morning and released on a $5,000 bond with conditions. She could not contact me directly or indirectly, could not come within 500 feet of my property, and had to surrender any firearms. She was also ordered to undergo a psychological evaluation. I thought that would be the end of it. Surely even Brenda would not be crazy enough to violate a court order. I was wrong again. A week later, I received a letter in my mailbox. It was not mailed, Someone had placed it directly in my box. The letter was from Brenda, typed and printed, 3 pages long. It was a rambling screed accusing me of conspiring against her, ruining her life and destroying her reputation in the neighborhood. She demanded that I drop all charges, pay her $50,000 in damages, and issue a public apology. The letter ended with, "If you don't comply, you'll regret it. I know where you live, obviously. I know where you work. I know your routine. You can't hide from me." I immediately called Officer Martinez and emailed him a scanned copy of the letter. He called me back within the hour. "Scott, this is a direct violation of her no-contact order, and the last line could be considered a criminal threat. I'm going to the prosecutor's office right now. Her bond is going to be revoked." That afternoon, Brenda was arrested again. This time, she was not released on bond. The prosecutor argued that she posed a danger to me and could not be trusted to follow court orders. The judge agreed and remanded her to Marion County Jail pending trial. The criminal trial was scheduled for July, about 4 months away. In the meantime, I finally had peace. I repaired all the damage, installed additional security measures, and tried to return to normal life. The HOA issued a formal statement to all residents explaining that Brenda was no longer associated with the board in any capacity, and that her actions did not represent the community's values. Several neighbors reached out to apologize for not believing me earlier or for staying silent during Brenda's harassment campaign. In late May, I was contacted by the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. An assistant prosecutor named Amanda Chen wanted to meet with me to prepare for trial. "Miss Whitmore's attorney is pushing for a plea deal, but we want your input before we agree to anything," Amanda explained during our meeting at her office. "Given the severity of her harassment and her repeated violations of court orders, we're prepared to take this to trial if necessary." "What kind of plea deal are they proposing?" I asked. "Guilty plea to misdemeanor criminal mischief and criminal trespass, 1 year of probation, mandatory counseling, and restitution for all damages. In exchange, we dropped the more serious charges and she'd avoid jail time beyond what she's already served." "No jail time seems light given everything she did," I said. "I agree," Amanda said. "But trials are unpredictable, and a jury might be sympathetic to a middle-aged woman with no prior criminal record. A guaranteed conviction with mandatory counseling and restitution might be better than risking an acquittal. What do you think I should do, honestly?" "I think we should reject the plea and go to trial. We have overwhelming evidence, including video footage of her committing the vandalism and her written threat to you. The judge has already shown they take her conduct seriously by revoking her bond. I think we can get a conviction on the more serious charges, which would mean actual jail time and a permanent criminal record. Then let's go to trial," I said. "She needs to face real consequences. If I let her plead to minor charges, she'll just target someone else next time." Amanda smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. We'll reject the plea offer." Brenda's attorney, a public defender named Robert Martinez, no relation to Officer Martinez, tried several more times to negotiate a plea deal, but we held firm. The trial was scheduled for July 15th. I spent June trying to move on with my life. Work kept me busy, and I started dating a woman named Tessa Carmichael who lived in a different neighborhood and was blissfully unaware of HOA drama. I told her the whole story on our 3rd date, expecting her to think I was crazy or exaggerating. "That's absolutely insane," Tessa said, her eyes wide. "That woman sounds unhinged." "She definitely is," I agreed. "And you have video of her smashing your mailbox, crystal clear footage. Want to see it?" We spent the rest of the evening watching the security camera footage and looking at photos of the damage. Tessa was appropriately horrified and supportive, which made me like her even more. The trial began on a sweltering July morning. The courthouse air conditioning was struggling against the summer heat, and the courtroom felt stuffy and uncomfortable. The jury was selected quickly. 7 women and 5 men, mostly middle-aged suburbanites who would presumably understand the dynamics of neighborhood disputes. Amanda gave a strong opening statement, laying out the timeline of events from the initial accident through Brenda's arrest for vandalism. She described Brenda's pattern of harassment, her refusal to accept responsibility, and her escalating criminal behavior. Robert Martinez gave a sympathetic opening for the defense, portraying Brenda as a dedicated community volunteer who had made mistakes while under extreme stress. He argued that the accident had traumatized her and that her subsequent actions were the result of untreated psychological distress, not criminal intent. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. Amanda called Officer Davidson, who testified about the original accident and his conclusion that Brenda had been at fault. She introduced the police report, photographs, and the citation Brenda had received. Thomas Grayson, my insurance attorney, testified about the civil case and Brenda's frivolous lawsuit. He explained how Brenda had persisted despite overwhelming evidence that she was wrong. Mrs. Henderson testified as a witness to the original accident. At 80 years old, she was a compelling figure on the stand, forceful and clear in her recollection. Robert Martinez tried to suggest her memory might be faulty, but Mrs. Henderson shut him down. "Young man, I may be old, but I know what I saw. That woman was driving like a maniac, and she crashed because of her own recklessness. Don't you dare suggest otherwise." The jury chuckled, and even the judge seemed amused. Donald Klein testified about Brenda's conduct as an HOA board member and her harassment of me after the accident. He brought records showing the numerous complaints residents had filed about Brenda's aggressive behavior. Officer Martinez testified about responding to the vandalism call and arresting Brenda. Amanda played the security camera footage showing Brenda smashing my mailbox and car headlights. The video was damning, showing her face clearly multiple times. I testified about the entire ordeal, from the accident through Brenda's ongoing harassment. Amanda walked me through each incident carefully, establishing the pattern of behavior. Robert Martinez tried to suggest I had provoked Brenda somehow, but I calmly explained that I had only defended myself against her false claims. "Mr. Zimmerman, isn't it true that you filed a counterclaim against Miss Whitmore for property damage?" Robert asked. "Yes, after she sued me for an accident she caused. I had legitimate damages to my property." "So you were trying to get money from her?" "I was trying to be compensated for damage she caused to my property. That's not unreasonable." "But you knew she was already under financial stress from her vehicle repairs." "I knew she was trying to blame me for her own mistakes, yes." Amanda objected. "Relevance, Your Honor. Mr. Zimmerman's legitimate property damage claim has nothing to do with Miss Whitmore's subsequent criminal behavior." "Sustained," the judge ruled. "Move on, Mr. Martinez." The prosecution's final piece of evidence was the threatening letter Brenda had sent me. Amanda read it aloud to the jury, emphasizing the threatening language. Several jurors looked disturbed. The defense called only 2 witnesses: a neighbor who testified that Brenda had always been friendly and helpful, and a psychologist who had evaluated Brenda and concluded she was suffering from adjustment disorder and depression related to the accident. The psychologist testified that Brenda's actions were the result of impaired judgment due to mental health issues. not criminal intent. Amanda's cross-examination of the psychologist was brutal. Doctor, does adjustment disorder or depression prevent someone from understanding that vandalism is illegal? Not necessarily, but it can impair judgment. Can you point to any specific medical evidence that Miss Whitmore did not understand her actions were wrong? Well, no, but in fact, Miss Whitmore's own letter to Mr. Zimmerman shows she understood exactly what she was doing, doesn't it? She threatened him deliberately. She was under stress. Doctor, yes or no? Do adjustment disorder and depression excuse criminal behavior? The psychologist hesitated. No, they do not excuse it, but they can be mitigating factors. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. Brenda did not testify in her own defense. Robert probably made that call because Brenda would have been a disaster on the stand, especially under Amanda's cross-examination. Closing arguments were predictable. Amanda emphasized the video evidence, the threatening letter, and Brenda's pattern of refusing to accept responsibility. Robert asked the jury to show compassion for a woman struggling with mental health issues. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Brenda guilty on all counts: criminal mischief, criminal trespass, violating a protective order, and making criminal threats. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Amanda warned me that even with the convictions, Brenda might not receive significant jail time because she had no prior criminal record. But at the sentencing hearing, something unexpected happened. The judge, having reviewed Brenda's complete case file including the civil lawsuit and her conduct as an HOA board member, took a hard line. Miss Whitmore, I've reviewed everything about this case, and what strikes me most is your absolute refusal to accept responsibility for your actions, Judge Morrison said. She was the same judge who had presided over the civil case. You caused an accident through your own reckless driving, then launched a campaign of harassment against an innocent man. Even after being ordered to stay away from him, you violated that order and threatened him. You show no remorse, no insight into your behavior, and no indication that you would stop if given the chance. Brenda started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. I'm sentencing you to 2 years in the Indiana Women's Prison with credit for time served. This sentence will be suspended after 1 year if you complete anger management counseling, pay full restitution to Mr. Zimmerman, and have no further legal violations. You will then serve 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to have no contact with Mr. Zimmerman for 5 years. You understand? Brenda finally broke down, sobbing at the defense table. I just wanted him to take responsibility. He ruined my life. Judge Morrison's expression hardened further. Miss Whitmore, you ruined your own life through your choices. Mr. Zimmerman did nothing wrong. The sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. Take her into custody. Bailiffs led Brenda away, still crying and protesting. I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, but also a strange sadness that it had come to this. Outside the courtroom, Amanda shook my hand. Well, that's as definitive as it gets. 1 year in prison should give her time to think about her choices. Thank you for everything, Amanda. I really appreciate how hard you fought. Just doing my job. But I'll be honest, cases like this are satisfying. You were clearly the victim here, and she was clearly in the wrong. Justice was served. I drove home, called Tessa, and told her the news. She was thrilled and insisted on taking me out to dinner to celebrate. We went to a nice steakhouse in downtown Indianapolis and had a great evening. Life slowly returned to normal. The HOA under Carol Drake's leadership was reasonable and professional. Neighbors who had avoided me during the drama gradually became friendly again. Mrs. Henderson remained a steadfast friend, often inviting me over for coffee and homemade cookies. My relationship with Tessa grew serious. By September, we were talking about moving in together, though probably not in Pinecrest Heights given all the baggage associated with my house there. In October, I received a check from the Marion County Clerk's office, $7,200, representing full restitution for all my property damage costs. Brenda's family had apparently paid it on her behalf to help her case for early release. I deposited the check and used part of it to upgrade my security system even further. The rest went into savings. Money could not compensate for the stress and anxiety Brenda had caused, but it was something. In November, I attended the HOA's annual meeting. Carol Drake gave a report on the board's accomplishments over the past year, including revising several overly restrictive bylaws and implementing a more reasonable enforcement process. She specifically apologized again for Brenda's conduct and thanked me for my patience with the organization. "Scott handled a terrible situation with grace and dignity," Carol said. "He's exactly the kind of neighbor we want in Pinecrest Heights." The room applauded. Several neighbors came up afterward to chat and welcome me properly to the community. It felt like closure. During the holiday season, I learned from Donald Klein that Brenda had been released from prison early for good behavior and successful completion of her counseling programs. She had moved out of Pinecrest Heights, apparently to her sister's house in Fort Wayne. The no-contact order remained in effect for 5 more years. I occasionally wondered how she was doing, whether she had learned anything from the experience, or if she was just biding her time. But mostly, I tried not to think about her at all. Tessa and I got engaged on New Year's Eve. We decided to sell my house in Pinecrest Heights and buy a new place together in a different neighborhood, somewhere without HOA drama and bad memories. The house sold quickly in February, and we closed on a beautiful home in Carmel, a northern suburb with a much more relaxed vibe. Mrs. Henderson cried when I told her I was moving, but she understood. "You deserve a fresh start, dear, but you stay in touch, you hear me?" I promise, Mrs. Henderson. On my last day in Pinecrest Heights, I drove through the neighborhood one final time. My old house looked good, the new owners already making it their own. I passed Brenda's old house, now occupied by a young family with small children. Life had moved on. The whole ordeal had taught me several important lessons. First, some people will never accept responsibility for their own mistakes, no matter how much evidence you present. Second, thorough documentation and evidence are your best protection against false accusations. Third, good neighbors and a supportive community matter more than anything. And finally, I learned that HOA board members wield surprising power over your daily life, which is why it is crucial to elect reasonable people to those positions. Brenda had abused her authority to pursue a personal vendetta, and it had destroyed her life. I married Tessa in June, a small ceremony with close friends and family. Mrs. Henderson attended as my guest of honor, sitting in the front row and crying happy tears. We honeymooned in Colorado, hiking in the mountains and enjoying scenery that had nothing to do with subdivisions or homeowner associations. A year after the trial, I received a letter from Brenda's attorney. It was not from Brenda herself, carefully complying with the no-contact order. The letter informed me that Brenda had completed her probation successfully and wanted to convey, through her attorney, that she had undergone significant therapy, and now understood that she had been entirely at fault for everything. The letter did not ask for forgiveness or a response, just stated that she had wanted me to know she finally accepted responsibility. I showed the letter to Tessa. "What do you think?" "I think it's good that she got help," Tessa said. But I also think you should throw that letter away and not give it another thought." She was right. I shredded the letter and moved on with my life. Years later, when people ask me about my time in Pinecrest Heights, I tell them the story of the HOA Karen who crashed her SUV in my driveway during a snowstorm and then demanded I pay for her repairs. It always gets reactions of disbelief and outrage. It sounds like something from a sitcom, too absurd to be real. But it was real, every frustrating, infuriating moment of it. And while I wish it had never happened, the experience taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, the importance of evidence, and how quickly a minor incident can spiral out of control when someone refuses to accept reality. I never joined another HOA board, but I did become more active in my new community in Carmel, serving on volunteer committees and getting to know my neighbors. I wanted to be part of creating the kind of supportive, reasonable neighborhood I had hoped Pinecrest Heights would be. Tessa and I built a happy life together in our new home. We adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Max, who had no interest in HOA politics or neighborhood drama. Our neighbors were friendly and normal, the kind of people who waved hello and helped shovel each other's driveways after snowstorms without keeping score or looking for violations. Sometimes on winter mornings, when snow was falling and I was out with my snowblower clearing the driveway, I would think about that February morning when Brenda came crashing into my life, literally. It seemed like a lifetime ago, something that had happened to a different person. But then I would look at my security cameras, always recording, and remember that the world has its share of unreasonable people who will go to extraordinary lengths to avoid admitting they were wrong. The best you can do is document everything, stand your ground, and hope that justice prevails. In my case, it did. The Karen crashed her SUV, demanded I pay for repairs, and ended up in prison for her harassment and threats. The legal system worked. Good neighbors supported me, and I got to move on to a better life. That is really all you can ask for when dealing with an HOA nightmare: vindication, justice, and the opportunity to leave it all behind. I got all three, plus some good stories to tell at parties and a healthy skepticism about ever joining a homeowners association again. As for Brenda Whitmore, I hope she learned her lessons and found peace. But that is her story, not mine. My story ended the day I drove away from Pinecrest Heights for the last time, ready for a fresh start with no HOA Karens, no violation notices, and no drama. Just a normal life in a normal neighborhood with normal people who understand that sometimes accidents happen. You apologize, your insurance handles it, and everyone moves on. That is how reasonable adults handle things. If only everyone understood that, the world would be a much simpler place.